Hi, I'm João Almeida, and you're watching The Cycling Dane.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another preview here on the channel. Today, we are looking at possibly the best Grand Tour of the year, the Giro d'Italia. And as always, I'm joined by Mr. Critical himself, Ewan. And Ewan, the Giro d'Italia, is it one of your favorite Grand Tours?
Well, I would say it is my personal favorite. The Corsa Rosa has a special place in my heart. Year after year, it provides an interesting narrative. It's not quite as formulaic as the Tour de France. We don't quite see the Galacticos clash there, but the Giro d'Italia certainly still brings something special. It's a more daring Grand Tour. It's, I would say, a more edgy Grand Tour, a little bit more forward-thinking than the other ones we have on the calendar, but it never fails to provide something special and a gripping general classification race that keeps us on the edge of our seats until the final day.
Well, last year we had, of course, Egan Bernal becoming the second Colombian to take the Maglia Rosa. Absolutely incredible victory, but unfortunately, he's not going to be on the start line.
This would be your second Giro d'Italia as well. Last year you did the Giro and it was supposed to start in Budapest, which I was really upset that it didn't. And it looks like it will start there in 2022. Was that something at the start of the season that you were looking forward to? You live in Budapest and then seeing the Giro come to Hungary as well.
Yeah, of course. It would be, I think, the biggest thing in the history of cycling in Hungary. And I honestly think after visiting all the stages, and of course knowing it without even visiting, that it will be a super spectacular race, super good. The prologue in Budapest, believe me, it's incredibly beautiful. And they would close all the way from one sightseeing point to another in front of the parliament and the Buda Castle and all of this stuff. It's incredible. It will be super nice. Also, the other two stages will be going in the Lake Balaton, which is quite famous in Europe. So it will be a super grande partenza. And also for the cycling, I was super hyped for that. And I was also shocked also that it will be cancelled. And then when they finally announced that there will be finally a Giro in 2020, but it won't start in Hungary. So it was a big shock. But I can understand without the spectators, it's not worth too much for the country to push if nobody can come to the country to visit. So I hope, next year we'll be here. And I hope I can be here next year as well.
Anyways, Ewan, this year's route has a bit of a change. It looked like we were going to have Budapest last year or the year before that, but that's been rescheduled to this year. So what does the 2022 Giro d'Italia hold for the riders?
Well, the 2022 Giro d'Italia will set off from Budapest up in Central Europe in the nation of Hungary. The first stage will actually be a road stage. Unlike the initial bids from Hungary, they have decided to change the order of the stages, allowing stage one to be a competitive road stage. This is the first time it's happened in the Giro since 2017. So things will kick off with the 195-kilometer long stage, which will end in the castle at Visegrad. That will be a 5-kilometer climb at 4%, up a winding ascent of that climb. It is going to be quite difficult. It's ranked as a category 4 and could make it unpredictable in the finale. Stage 2 will be a time trial around the Hungarian capital of Budapest, the final kilometer of which will be a uphill kicker to the line, which could favor our GC contenders or some people trying to hold on to that pink jersey after a successful first day. Stage 3 will keep the riders inside Hungary as we go from Kapszavar up to Balatonfüred, around the Balaton Lake, in fact, for the sprint stage. And this is a paint-by-numbers Giro d'Italia sprint. There's no real adversaries in the final 5 kilometers. On stage 4, we actually head back to the Italian Republic with a stage up to Mount Etna. This year, we got Mount Etna from the Refugio Sapienza side, which is the ascent we did back in 2017 when Jan Polanski took the stage win there. And this will provide, we assume, the first GC shake-up of this year's Corsa Rosa. Stage 5 will also be in Sicily between Catania and Vincenzo Nibali's hometown of Messina, but don't worry, it won't really be a stage for the Shark of Messina. Neither will stage 6 as we cross into Calabria with a flat stage there. Stage 7 is a rolling stage from Diamante to Potenza, which is a nasty kicker in the final kilometer, which could be interesting if a breakaway is not in front, but this stage looks like it could be one for the breakaway. Stage 8 takes us to Pizza City, Napoli, where we'll have laps around that city, very similar to the first stage of the 2013 edition of the Giro d'Italia. Stage 9, however, could be the end of this first chapter of the race. It is a 187-kilometer long stage from Isernia to Blockhouse. Yes, the infamous Blockhouse climb. It's the first time in 5 years that we've been here, and the final 13 kilometers of this stage will be at an average of 8.4%. Blockhouse, it's tough. We have very, very steep 10% gradients as well. It's exposed. It's almost Italy's version of Mont Ventoux, and it will provide a huge shakeup in the GC at the end of the first week of racing. After a rest day in Abruzzo, stage 10 will get the race kicked off from Pescara with a rolling stage there. Stage 11 is a typical Giro pancake day, or should we say Crespella day, into Reggio Emilia. And the following day will take us between two major Italian cities of Parma and Genoa, but it's mostly sightseeing trips there. Same with stage 13, which sets off from Sanremo, and stage 14, which will end in Torino, the city hosting this year's Eurovision Song Contest the week before. Stage 15, however, into the Aosta Valley will be a huge shakeup for the GC battle as we head up to Cogna in that unique and beautiful part of Italy. This final climb, in fact, will be 22 kilometers in length and will feature a bonus second sprint just a couple of kilometers away from the finale in Cogna's town centre, which could really shake up the GC battle there and can make for an interesting finale. After another rest day, stage 16 will take us to an infamous climb of the Giro d'Italia, the Passo di Mortirolo, as we head from Salo to Aprica. The Mortirolo, in fact, will be at 12 kilometers in length and at 7% average, with maximum gradients at 16%, but the summit will come at 70k to go, a little bit too early for key moves, but it could certainly break up the race as we've seen in previous years, including back in 2019, which was the last time we visited the Mortirolo. After this, we have a downhill, but a final kicker towards the end at the Santa Cristina climb, which will crest out with 6 kilometers to go. After that, we have a descent into the town of Aprica to close off stage 16. Stage 17 is another strange finale. We have some nasty climbs on this stage, including the Monte Rovere climb, which will be the most difficult at 8 kilometers in length and at a 9.9% average. But after that, we have a strange descent into Lavarone, which means that we might have this strange dynamic after the summit of this climb. Nevertheless, stage 18 is the obligatory Giro d'Italia sprint stage, which will always occur as we head away from the mountains just for one day to allow the Maglia Ciclamino battle to have its final chapter in this race. However, stage 19 will see the riders pass into Slovenia as we head into Friuli on the Italian border. This stage looks like a very interesting day on paper. We have 30 kilometers of racing in Slovenia, which includes the Kolovrat climb, but we have this nasty kicker to the end back in Italy at the Castelmonte Sanctuary, which is 7 kilometers and an 8% average gradient, which is categorized as a category 2 climb. So that could offer up a place for the GC riders to make a move before stage 20, the final mountain day of racing between Belluno and Marmolada, which includes some big, nasty climbs in the Giro d'Italia's history, the Passo San Pellegrino, the Passo Pordoi, before the finale at the Passo Fedaia, which means this stage has a total of 5,000 meters of climbing, which will really test the riders for one last time on this Giro d'Italia. After this day, we might know who's won pink, but if we haven't already, there's a 17-kilometer time trial around the Roman city of Verona. Yes, where Romeo and Juliet is all set. That'll be the amphitheater of the finale of this Giro d'Italia as we find out who will be the king of the Giro and the holder of the Trofeo Senza Fine.
Well, thank you for that, Ewan. And yeah, what an interesting, well, potentially interesting Giro d'Italia it will be. But anyways, moving on to the favorites and where best to start without Ineos Grenadiers, and previous winner Richard Carapaz looks like he is going to be heading up the team wearing number 1, the Olympic champion. Ewan, this seems that it's going to be set in stone for Richard Carapaz to put on a very strong challenge. He's been consistent, well, one of the most consistent riders in Grand Tours apart from Tadej Pogačar in the last few years, and the team that they've got is absolutely stacked as well.
Exactly. Carapaz is one of these guys on the start list that is incredibly consistent and incredibly reliable. Looking at his record post-COVID, of course, he has 2 Grand Tour podium finishes at the 2020 Vuelta a España and the 2021 Tour de France. And even this season, he's looking quite good as well. He had some problems earlier on with the Provence, as well as in Tirreno Adriatico. He had to quit those races, but he bounced back at Catalunya, finishing 2nd overall there, as well as taking a stage win on that courageous move with Sergio Higuita. And I think that race and that performance does highlight what Carapaz has that few riders seem to have on his level, this courageousness and this bravery to attack from far out and to make key and decisive moves. That's how he won the 2019 Giro d'Italia, let's not forget. He made a big move going into Courmayeur, and he took the stage win there with a 2-minute gap over the key favorites of that race. And this year, that could be very, very useful. We have many stages, as I mentioned in the route overview, that have strange finales, which are a little bit unpredictable. We have key moves that could come way before the final 5 kilometers of racing. This is the kind of length I could see Carapaz trying to shake things up, trying to make a key move, because we only have 4 summit finishes of this race, of which he is very strong at competing at. But in order to make this a more open battlefield at this Giro d'Italia, Carapaz needs to be aggressive, and he can bring that to the table more than some of the other contenders that we will talk about. Looking towards his team are incredibly, incredibly strong. We're looking towards key names here. Castroviejo, who was vital last year in that final week of racing to protect Egan Bernal when he was looking a little bit shaky. Also looking towards his countryman, Jonathan Narvaez, who's just so polyvalent. He can climb, he can sprint, he can punch. He might be very, very useful on stages like stage 16 and 19, which Narvaez could be in the mix supporting there, as well as Pavel Sivakov, who could be this year's Danny Martinez. By that, I mean that he could be a vital domestique. He'll be up there until the final 2 kilometers of racing. He could even snatch a top 10 himself. He's done it in the past here at the Giro, and I'm excited to see what Pavel Sivakov can do, because he could be a vital part of Carapaz's Giro d'Italia effort. So to conclude, I think Ineos are coming here with probably the most reliable contender here for a podium, if not the victory.
Yeah, I think they also just, the team, it's really like Ineos Grenadiers are really throwing their might behind this. There's no Roger Pog here, of course. And just having Richie Porte here with all his experience as well. Okay, none of it really that good in the Giro d'Italia, but it's just such an experienced team. Puccio as well, he's been around the blocks for the Giro d'Italia. Ben Swift, of course, national champion. Yeah, this is an Ineos Grenadiers of old, this kind of team. But anyways, last year's, well, where should we go next? There's a plethora of riders we could look at, but if we follow your video, the top 5 favorites will look towards Astana, and they are coming with the 2-time Giro d'Italia winner, who probably isn't going to be the headline act here. The headline act, we think, is going to be the middleweight boxer from Colombia, Miguel Angel Lopez, of course, returning to Astana after a brief gap year in Movistar, shall we say. But Ewan, a lot of this team here have actually won the Maglia Rosa. Valerio Conti, of course, and Joe Dombrowski took a stage win last year. But how do you see Miguel Angel Lopez's return to the Giro d'Italia with Astana going?
I'm quite optimistic about this. In terms of Lopez's chances of doing well, let's look first of all towards the route. Not many time trialing kilometers at all. We know Lopez bleeds time in those kind of events. Just look at the Planche des Belles Filles time trial back in 2020's Tour de France, for instance. And as well, I mean, 4 summit finishes, yes, that's not quite what he would want, but they're nasty summit finishes. They're steep, the kind of ones that we could see Lopez fly away on. And if we have Carapaz make a courageous move in the middle of a stage, I think we could see Lopez try to be up there as a protagonist in those. And for this kind of attacking spirit, we have to look at the Tour of the Alps performance. He took a stage win there. Yes, he didn't perform that well overall at that race, but he took a stage win there ahead of Pinot, breaking French hearts. But that was the kind of Miguel Angel Lopez that we know of, the guy who can just spring away with 2, 3, 5 kilometers to go and just boom, sail away to victory. We saw it last year's Vuelta a España in the mountains there. We saw it at the Col de la Loze in the 2020 Tour de France. He is a very reliable guy to just bounce away in the finale of a mountain stage and gain some extra time. That could happen at Blockhouse, Edna, Fedaya. At least 3 occasions it could happen. Also looking at Astana, it's a very, very strong team. You mentioned Nibali. I mean, I'm not going to say he's a factor in this race. He was looking good last year with Trek in helping Ciccone and so forth, but I'm just not going to say that he's the key figure here. I'm looking more towards Dombrowski and De La Cruz in particular, maybe even Harold Tejada as well. Dombrowski, I'm super excited to see him here. And with De La Cruz, I mean, if everything falls apart for Miguel Angel Lopez, which, it could, De La Cruz is a super consistent rider. He's got 3 7th places at the Vuelta a España under his belts. That's a pretty solid palmares. And I mean, I'm just assuming he's going to be up there in the finale as well with Miguel Angel Lopez to sort of bully the other teams. But I mean, Astana, they don't have that je ne sais quoi that other teams are lacking, but they're certainly a super consistent team that could get a podium place.
So anyways, next we're going to go to one of the friends of the channel, João Almeida. And before we talk about what his chances are, here is what João Almeida said himself about his Giro d'Italia expectations.
What was your ambition this year? Is it go back to the Giro and get that podium, get that Maglia Rosa?
I mean, of course, the goal is the podium. It's been 2 good years in the Giro for me. Good success there. Of course, we're gonna aim for the podium, but it's quite hard. It's gonna be really good contenders there. And like I said, I changed everything this year. So it's not gonna be easy. We're gonna try. Of course, all the other races I go, I'll still try to do good results, and of course, it depends what are the team goals. Like UAE Tour, we're gonna take a really strong team. Of course, we're not gonna ride for me. We're gonna ride for the strongest rider, who should be Tadej, But yeah, for the Giro, let's see how it goes. If we fail, it's no worries. I have plenty of time in my career to have success in the Giro and other races. We are not really afraid to fail on that. There's a long season and plenty of time to develop myself and take my time. And this is also one of the reasons I took the team, because they really believe in me, and they give me this long process, the 5-year contract. So it shows that they really believe on me, and I can count with them and they can count with me.
So anyways, João Almeida, one of the most consistent riders in the last 2 years, within the top 6 in both the 2 editions he's been part of. Of course, this is the first time he's kind of leading a team. I was a bit sad to see that Fernando Gaviria is on the start list. But do you think this Portuguese superstar, well, there's actually quite a few Portuguese in his team, but do you think João Almeida will have a good chance of wearing the Maglia Rosa again and maybe taking it all the way to Verona?
Well, it's certainly on the cards, isn't it? This UAE team is looking very strong on paper. Yes, we have the Gaviria-Riqueza duo that are coming here. I mean, it must be in Gaviria's contract somewhere that he has to ride the Giro d'Italia. But apart from that, this team is dedicated towards Almeida. Let's look towards his record. There's only one other person in the professional peloton at the moment who has a better record in UCI World Tour stage races since the COVID break. That rider's Pogacar, because Almeida's been in the top 10 at every single UCI World Tour stage race he has started. That's a phenomenal record, and I'm going to say that record will continue here. He doesn't seem to be plagued by bad luck in getting involved in crashes and so forth, so I'm hoping that caveat stays in. I'm hoping that stays in place. You never know what the commentators curse, but João is just that kind of guy who can be there. Whatever happens in a race, whether it's a long distance attack, he could try to be there. Whether it's a mountaintop finish, yes, he'll be there. He's also a punchy guy who has a good kick on him in a sprint. I think every scenario would involve João Almeida. Does he have that killer blow to win on a mountain stage against Carapaz or Miguel Angel Lopez? I'm not quite convinced yet, but he's certainly going to be up there and as one of the safest bets that you can probably find for a top 5 in this whole video. In terms of also analyzing this route, the time trialing kilometers will backfire against João. He is one of the very few riders in this video who is a very, very strong time trialist. He's limited with these 26 kilometers of time trialing, 9 of which will come on stage 2, which could provide him the chance to wear the pink jersey or at least try to take it when we come to the mountains on stage 4. But in the high mountains, I'm just not quite convinced. UAE without Pogacar, it is a different vibe. We saw that at Catalonia. We saw that at those races where João just seemed to have a bit of a tactical breakdown with his teammates, but hopefully they have it all sorted out in time for this year's Giro d'Italia. They have a really strong team, and they could certainly get on that final podium.
I'm going to have to disagree with you. I don't think it's the best team they could have had, but of course, all the eggs are in the Targacha basket, and it is going to be a bit annoying to see that split that they're going to have with Gaviria and Riqueza being there, of course. And we'll see where Covi actually fits into the role of being between Almeida and Gaviria. But it's a bit of a shame you put so much money into Almeida coming to the team, and you know his big target is a Giro d'Italia, and then you have the elephant in the room of being Gaviria there. We all know he's not going to be beating Mark Cavendish or Caleb Ewan. Watch him win 4 stages now. But yeah, anyway, moving on to another team, and one of his prize packages of last year, Bahrain Victorious, of course, Damiano Caruso, absolutely extraordinary Giro d'Italia for him. He's not on the start list, but Poel Bilbao, Ewan, is that who you're going to be looking towards guiding this team to potentially another podium?
Well, Bilbao or Landa, to be or not to be. Let's unpack this, beginning with Bilbao. He's the rider you mentioned there.
Well, Landa, what happened last year with Landa and us? We thought he was going to win.
Exactly. That's why I'm a little bit skeptical. That's why I want to focus on Bilbao first, because he's been looking very, very good this year so far. 3rd place at UAE, 5th place at Strada Bianca, 9th at Tirreno Adriatico, 5th at the Basque Country, 4th at Tour of the Alps. Yes, he crumbled on the final stage of that race, but that's a very, very, very good record. Poel Bilbao, I think, is one of the more overlooked GC contenders out there at the moment. He's won Grand Tour stages. He's come 5th place at the Giro d'Italia before. He's a phenomenal guy. He's one of the best descenders in the world right now. He's a fantastic puncher. He's also a very consistent climber. This guy offers so much. He's probably one of the most all-round contenders we are going to mention in this video. And I think he has to be mentioned as one of the names that could contend for a podium. Do I see Bilbao having that edge to be up there in the mountains when we go to the Paso Fedaya and being right up there in the finale? No, but he could certainly try to bag a 3rd place or a 2nd place in this race. Bahrain Victorious, with this team in particular, look like they're trying to get that. We have the strong riders of Domen Novak, as well as Wout Poels and Jan Tratnik, who look to be all behind either Bilbao or Landa for this. And I mean, now looking towards Landa, who I know many people are very, very pro for, Landismo is alive to some extent. 3rd place at Tirreno Adriatico, 11th place at Tour of the Alps. He was visible at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He's also down to ride the Tour de France, if our sources are correct. I mean, I don't know. I'd love to see Landa up there. I'd love to see him contend this Grand Tour, but I'm just not quite convinced. He hasn't done much UCI World Tour racing this year, not quite as much as Bilbao. So his form is a little bit more unknown. But after last year, after having so much faith in Landa at the Giro and then at the Vuelta, and just not quite reaping the rewards that we were hoping for, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we were left with a lot of unpromised promises. But yeah, Jan Tratnik is definitely going to be an interesting factor. He's been such a strong rider in the classics, but of course he's not a favorite. So moving on, and one of the most exciting start lines probably of this year is, well, if you look at Giro d'Italia results in recent times, well, not GC results, I'd probably say more. Bora Hansgrohe are coming here with 2 riders who finished on the podium back when Theo Gegenhardt rose above all, but they were riding for Sunweb. And they're also bringing Emmanuel Buchmann, who looked very good last year, where he was sitting in 6th place before he unfortunately had to abandon. But Ewan, this team, it seems to be an incredible team in terms of GC talent. Wilco Kelderman, do you think that's the rider that they're going to be riding for?
This Bora, I think, have the most interesting dynamic out of any team here. 3 big riders to contend with. It's strange that Bora have brought Kelderman, a very established time trialist, former Dutch national champion, to a Giro d'Italia where there's only 26 kilometers of time trialing. I mean, there's a Tour de France with quite a lot of time trialing happening later this year. I probably would have sent Kelderman there, especially when you have Vlasov, who's on fire right now. He could have slipped into this team at a Grand Tour that suits him well. But with Kelderman, yeah, he's reliable. He could probably get a top 10 without anybody really noticing, without winning a stage, without making any key attacks. But it's what he does. I'm not expecting Kelderman really to be this firework of a rider. I'm expecting that more maybe from Jai Hindley of Australia, who was very bullish in the off season about his chances at this year's Giro, saying that he was building himself back up to this form, that he wasn't just a one-tour wonder. And maybe that this year he's going to be there. He was fifth at Tirreno Adriatico, which was a very strong ride from him there. I mean, if he rolls with the punches like he did in 2020 with Theo Gegenhardt on these longer days where we have decisive points, maybe 50 kilometers away from the line, when the likes of Carapaz or Superman attack, I think Hindley's going to be the guy that follows it quicker than a Kelderman, for instance. And then we have the third guy, Emil Buchmann. Scott, I've done some digging on Pro Cycling Stats, and I have a question for you. When was the last time Buchmann got a top 10 in a UCI World Tour stage race?
Ooh. I'm going to have to pass on that one. I know there's so much faith with Emmanuel Buchmann after his 2019 Tour de France, but I don't really see it. So sorry, guys.
Well, that was the last time he finished in the top 10 of a UCI World Tour stage race. That proves my point. Case closed for Emil Buchmann.
Watch really the comments get angry about this.
But I mean, yes, he's Germany's only chance in this race. He climbs very well. Last year, he was just coming up at the right point, but crashed on the way into Novogorica. This year, I mean, I just don't see it. He's been on the start list of 8 races at UCI World Tour level, and he hasn't cracked the top 10 at any of them.
Sad times. But moving swiftly on before we get any more complaints. Well, now I don't really know where to go. We can we'll go for your favorite. We'll go for Jumbo-Visma. They are, of course, coming with Tom Dumoulin and the previous winner of this race. Do you think Big Tom is going to have another big win in the Giro d'Italia?
No, I don't. It's a shame. It's a shame. No, but I just don't see it. Tom Dumoulin, yes, fabulous rider. I just don't think he has the legs. I really don't. He's got a lot of interesting guys in the team with him, and looking towards Koen Bouwman, Tobias Vos, maybe Chris Harper, Sam Omen. A lot of great riders on the start list, but Tom Dumoulin, he just hasn't been looking like the same rider since he took a break from the sports last year. I think that's just it. I'm not expecting to see the bumblebees stinging, really. Tobias Vos, he's a great time trialist, but this isn't quite his kind of race.
Well, we'll have to see if Vos can actually get another top 10. Of course, cracked the Tom Teton last year. Sam Omen has been in the top 10 before as well. So maybe Tom Dumoulin won't be their principal rider. Who knows? But moving swiftly on, because I thought you were going to be a lot more fanboy about him. One rider who's, of course, had a very interesting relationship with the Giro d'Italia, very bullish. And you know where I'm going with this. Bike Exchange, Simon Yates. Of course, it looked like he was going to win it back in 2018. Kind of burnt himself out. Then in 2019 said he was definitely going to win it. Didn't quite happen. And Jürgen, do you think this is going to be the year that the Brit finally cracks the Giro d'Italia?
Well, he's got unfinished business here. That's the quote I remember from the finale back in Rome in 2018 when he rolled across the line, I think 30th or so in general classification after crumbling. Last year was the closest we came to seeing Yates really light up the Corsa Rosa, taking a stage win and a 3rd place overall. But I don't know. I think he's certainly going to be there. He will be a protagonist. He'll most likely be up there to take a stage win. He took a very valiant stage at Paris-Nice this year. He's been taking a stage at Asturias as well, just yesterday before the day we were recording this. And he's got that daring style, and he's also got a real kick on him, quite a sharp acceleration. I think only a few of these riders could really respond to, but he's unpredictable. I think he's a very, very unpredictable rider. Some days he's phenomenal, golden Yates, and some days he just doesn't quite have that edge. He just rolls in with the sort of mid-tier riders, like maybe a Tom Dumoulin or a Giulio Ciccone, which we could see happen at the Giro as well. I'm just trying to think about the golden level of Simon Yates that I just mentioned. And Scott, I'm thinking the golden Yates, that's probably Tirreno 2020 we last saw it, where he just doesn't really put a foot wrong. And in a Grand Tour, you need to be there everywhere. You can't really put a foot wrong. And he's only had one clean Grand Tour really where he hasn't put a foot wrong. Last year's Giro, it took him a very long time to warm up into that Giro. I remember at Monte Zoncolan, we were still wondering, about what was happening to Yates because he was looking pretty blunt on that race. It was only until the final 3 days of racing that he became lively on the Corsa Rosa. So, I mean, I'm not convinced he's going to win this, but Simon Yates on the podium is certainly a possibility.
So anyways, moving on to a French rider by request of Ewan. And this rider, of course, did his first Giro d'Italia last year, Romain Bardet, who's going to be heading up Team DSM. And they would dearly love to get a Maglia Rosa in this race. Do you think Romain Bardet is going to seal the victory for DSM once again in the Giro d'Italia?
Well, he's looking like the most likely candidate to do so. Romain Bardet is fresh off a Tour of the Alps win, a race that has historically been a very good teller of form, but before the Giro d'Italia. He's one of these few riders, I think, that have really riding on form, who's got that big race win under his belt before coming to this race. A lot of these other contenders, yes, they've got podiums, yes, they've done well, but Bardet is the only one to have properly clinched a stage race before the start of this Giro. And to be honest, I'm pretty positive about Bardet's chances. It's the best we've seen of him for a long time. And I mean, with Bardet, he can take a while to warm up into a Grand Tour. He usually rides very well in the final week or two, which is a good thing for this year. We have a very tough final week where stamina and having the ability to be there will be very, very important. As we saw last year, he gained a lot of time in that final week by being a little bit more daring, by just staying up there in contention. And I think he's going to do that this year. Looking towards the team as well, Thymen Aronsman is a very interesting Dutch rider who's starting this race. He'll be starting alongside Bardet after sealing the white jersey at the Tour of the Alps. We also have Martin Tusveld and Chris Hamilton to help in the mountains. They were on the start lane of DSM or Sunweb's 2020 Giro d'Italia, where they finished second and third in the podium. However, DSM. You have your best chance at a GC in a Grand Tour for a while, and you send Alberto Dainese and Cees Bol, two sprinters, your two best sprinters, some would say. That feels silly. You have a Tour de France where I don't think you have a real leader there. Why don't you send Cees Bol and Dainese to the Tour de France? Make them focus on the Tour de France, or maybe leave Dainese with the team here and try to get a top 10 on Tour de France stages instead of using two quite important places on their Giro team when they could be supporting Bardet. That doesn't quite make sense to me, but I think Bardet is going to be a key contender despite the unwelcome arrival of Cees Bol and Dainese on the start line.
Like that isn't, well, it hasn't been our first complaint of DSM and definitely won't be the last. But anyways, moving swiftly on, some of the outsiders before we move on to the points classification that we haven't really talked about. Movistar, of course, coming here with Ivan Souza, who's fresh off victory, a stage victory actually today as of recording. And of course, Alejandro Valverde will be looking to impress as well. Of course, he's a former podium finisher in the Giro d'Italia. EF Education Easy Post, of course, coming in here with Huw Carthy, who we haven't had much hype about him doing well at the Giro d'Italia, but maybe he will just do a Vuelta a España and get on the podium, take the Queen Stage victory. We don't know. But Cofidis as well, they are coming here reportedly with Guillaume Martin, so that would be very interesting. His first ever Giro d'Italia, if that is the case. Speaking of first ever Giro d'Italias, the young superstar in the making from Denmark is coming here, Mathieu Skjelmose from Trek Segafredo, but of course they're going to be headed up by Giulio Ciccone. Well, the Giro is going to his neck of the woods. Blockhouse is of course one of his training routes, so that's going to be very interesting to see if that home knowledge comes into his advantage. But nevertheless, moving on to the points classification, and last year we of course had Peter Sagan take this jersey for the first time, which was good to see. But we had that episode last year that most of the sprinters kind of disappeared from the race, either crashed out or abandoned. And one of the riders, Caleb Ewan, didn't finish the Giro d'Italia, but is looking to become the first ever Australian sprinter to win this points classification. Of course, Australia's only won it one time before, and that was Cadel Evans back in 2010, which just shows you how silly the points classification sometimes is in the Giro d'Italia. But Ewan, do you think Caleb Ewan is going to be the best rider to potentially win this?
Well, with 7 flat stages on offer, I don't think we're going to see a sort of Sagan type taker this year. I think it's more geared towards a Caleb Ewan. And Lords did Lotto Soudal need the points this year. They have not been looking quite so great in 2022 so far. But Caleb Ewan could be their guardian angel here. He is on the start list for the Tour de France as well. And I mean, he's abandoned the Giro multiple times in order to focus on the Tour de France. But hopefully this year he stays in until the end. But he's been on good form this year so far. He's taken a stage win at every stage race he started at Turkey, Tirreno, Tour des Alpes-Maritimes et du Var, and also the Saudi Tour, all of which had a solid sprinting field. So I'm pretty optimistic that Caleb's going to be there. We know that Caleb Ewan is probably the strongest sprinter in the world on his day. He's just got that Midas touch that no one can really compete with. Also, with the team, have Roger Kluge and Michael Schwarzman here as well. Two great lead-out men, particularly Kluge, who could just provide that edge over some of the other teams, but it's going to be hard for them. If it comes down to a battle of trains, I just think Quick-Step is going to outdo them. But if it's based on pure speed, I think Caleb Ewan is just that little bit quicker than Cavendish at the moment. But it'll be interesting to see them clash. They're very similar riders in their sprinting style.
Mark Cavendish, I think, is Caleb Ewan's hero, but very true. They're very similar stature and everything. And do you think Mark Cavendish and him are basically going to be duking it out at the start? Well, at every one of these flat stages?
I would assume so. I would assume so. Maybe Caleb is a little bit harder in hillier sprints. We have maybe that sprint in Naples, for instance, that could maybe favor Caleb more than Cavendish, even the finish in Genoa, which has a slight false flats towards the end. I do see them two being the two key contenders for this Ciclamino, but the other caveat with those two, they're not the best in the high mountains. What about a time limit? It's got to wipe someone out. There are a lot of really, really hard days in the mountains here. Sprinters don't always make it through to the final stage of the Giro d'Italia. Yes, we've seen Pascal Ackermann make it to the end and Arnaud Démare in recent years, but I mean, it's going to be hard to see them both make it to the finishing line.
The other caveat here, or the elephant in the room, even though elephant in the room, have you ever seen an elephant in the room? Mathieu van der Poel is going to be doing his first ever Giro d'Italia. Of course, we did a whole video about that. So check that out on the Cycling Day and Extra. But Ewan, do you think Mathieu van der Poel could potentially be a factor here? He climbs. He's been able to beat some of the best sprinters in the world before. He could do one of these long-range Peter Sagan attack in the mountains and try and sweep up the points, the intermediate points. Do you think he's going to be a factor, or is he just going to be taking some of the punchier stages?
I think he's going to be an interesting element in this year's Giro. We have only seen him at one Grand Tour before, at the Tour de France. There's so many contextual elements to that Tour de France. He took yellow early on. That was box ticked. He competed every single day, full out for it. And he also had to focus on Tokyo. It's so different. This year, I mean, I'm sorry, the finish to Visegrad, that screams Van der Poel. Even on stage 2, we now know Van der Poel can time trial pretty well. Who knows what he could do there? Hold the pink jersey for 3 days. It's not quite as long as he had it at the Tour de France, but it's still something. If he stays in the race for long enough, until the first rest day at least, stage 7 into Potenza looks very good for him. Also, a couple of stages is further deeper into the race. Maybe the one into Turin could see Van der Poel do well if he does stay in the race. He is also going to the Tour de France, like Caleb Ewan. So it's going to take a lot from physically to make it all the way through. He wants to do it. He wants to feel like a more complete cyclist. And apparently the way to do that is to ride the Giro and the Tour. So we'll wait and see. I'm optimistic about this. I really think he's a key contender to take pink at least once in this race. But I'm not sure about Ciclamino. In a flat sprint, we haven't really seen Van der Poel contest a flat sprint in a long time at this top level. UAE Tour in 2021. It's the last time I think we've really seen Van der Poel battle it out with the top level sprinters on a flat stage. But you never know. It's certainly going to capture headlines.
So another headline, of course, as well. Benjamin Girmay, the sensation from Eritrea, is also going to be coming to the Giro d'Italia and could potentially be in the mix for many of these sprints. And Ewan, do you think he could mix it for the points classification or potentially just grab a stage win here or there?
I don't think he will really be up there in the Ciclamino. I'm hoping for it, of course. We're big fans of Biniam on the channel, as you'll know. But I think he's certainly in contention to maybe take a stage win. Visegrad as well on stage 1 provides a chance. It's an uphill sprint. He's very comfortable on these uphill finales. I mean, he's got a team here that have a lot of punches, a lot of wild cards. With Pozzo Vivo and Tarme here, trying to go for the blue jersey in the mountains or some breakaway stages there. But Girmay, I think, could certainly be up there. I don't see him beating a Caleb Ewan. I don't see him beating a Mark Cavendish, for instance. And I'm not sure if he can really defeat a Van der Poel. But if Van der Poel is out of the mix, Binny is really your number 2 man. Him and Magnus Cort, very similar guys, who's also on the start list to maybe contend some of these hillier, more gnarly sprint stages.
So anyways, moving on to our favorite part of the show, and that is, of course, the predictions round. And as this is a Grand Tour, it's going to be predictions of the podium, each of the jerseys. But yeah, Ewan, without further ado, who is your podium for the 2022 Giro d'Italia?
Okay, well, this was a hard one, but I'm going to say third place goes to Pello Bilbao of Bahrain Victorious. Second place goes to João Almeida of UAE Team Emirates. And the winner will be Richard Carapaz of Ineos Grenadiers. I just think he's so consistent. He's the safest bet to win this race. Ineos Grenadiers want to make it 3 in a row. And why not?
Well, I'm going to say Skilmos is going to win this. No, I'm kidding. I think Landa is going to be finishing in third place. Now that I've said Landa, he's not going to be finishing this race. Second place, I think Richard Carapaz, and then João Almeida is going to become the first Portuguese winner of the Giro d'Italia, and he's going to, complete his little Giro d'Italia journey, but we'll have to wait and see. And finish on the podium for the first time ever. But anyways, moving on to the points classification jersey. Who do you think is going to take that, Ewan?
I am going to say it will be Giacomo Nizzolo, because I don't think Caleb Ewan will make it to the end.
I'm going to say Mathieu van der Poel, just to see what happens. So anyways, Ewan, who do you think is going to win the blue jersey after France took it last year?
There are a number of riders I think could take it. Should I just list people?
That's not how this works.
This is the hardest one to predict because you never know what's going to happen. I am going to say it will go to...
That's not a rider.
Pozzovivo.
I was going to say that. I'm going to say Vincenzo Nibali. But anyways, that's it for our Giro d'Italia preview show. Make sure to check out the podcast if you haven't already. Also, subscribe to the channel, like the video. Check out our Cycling Dane Extra channel and Cycling Dane Gamer channel, because we're going to have a lot of Giro content on those 2 channels. And of course, every day we're going to have videos all across the place. We're going to have stage previews, we're going to have stage recaps, and of course our streams of every single stage. So hope you can all join us for all of that. But make sure to comment down below what your predictions of the Giro d'Italia are as well. So with that, thank you very much for watching or listening if you're on the podcast, and we will see you around.